Good afternoon. Mallow here, and today I have this lovely hunter green stretch velvet that I'm sewing with here because I have made the bell sleeve t-shirt dress from scatteredthoughtsofacraftymom.com for BabyCat's winter show, which is happening at her school on Friday. They decided to tell me that she needed something in either red or green on Monday for dress rehearsal on Friday, giving me 2 days to come up with something, and I've just finished all the holiday shopping, so I am flat ass broke. But I am also a sewist. And as such, I happen to have this stretch velvet from a previous project left over, and it was more than enough to make a size 3T dress. So that's what I did. And as you can see, I am blocking out the pattern pieces here. I have sped up this footage because nobody wants to watch 2.5 hours of me fighting with my 1950s sewing machine. She's a beauty and a workhorse, but she's temperamental. Anyway, I'm just blocking out my pattern pieces here to make them easier to cut out properly later, because this is kind of a heavy fabric, and with a small table and a toddler running around, it was just going to be too much to cut them all out of the chunk of piece. Normally I'd do it on the floor, but didn't have a lot of time, so I had to do it while BabyCat was awake today. Anyway, here I am trying to see if the sleeve will fit on that piece, and it won't quite fit. So, there we are. I'm pinning things down. And it's right about that moment where I realized that I had actually pinned the fold edge that's supposed to be against the fold against the open edge of the fabric instead of against the fold. So you see me flip it here, and then I get back to work as planned. Pinning that down. One thing that I found while working with this stretch fabric is that no matter what I did, no matter how many times I pressed the edges down, they kept rolling. And yes, I am aware that that is not a sewing tape measure. I don't know where any of my sewing tape measures are. And it's probably BabyCat's fault. If Mama has it, BabyCat wants it. She's just at that age. But anyway, what I'm actually doing right now is trying to pin the edges as flat as I can so that I can get an accurate measurement for the skirt piece. The pattern, which by the way is free on scatteredthoughtsofacraftymom.com, only had the pattern for the bodice. You're meant to measure the skirt part and just cut it out, and that's to save paper and ink for those of us printing the pattern pieces at home, as I did. Now I'm cutting things out properly now that I have that. And if you've noticed, when I iron, I'm using a piece of cardboard. I no longer have an ironing board because, except when I'm sewing, I don't need to iron. I have an ironing pad, but heck if I know where it is at the moment. I am not the owner of scatteredthoughtsofacraftymom.com, but I definitely relate to scattered thoughts. All right, now here you'll see I have cut out one bodice piece, and I have to move the piece to another block of fabric because the neckline in the front is a little bit lower than it is in the back. And again, to save paper and ink, Scattered Thoughts has made it so that you only have to print it once and just cut along 2 different lines for the neck. Now here I am. I had forgotten to cut out the binding piece, but I am cutting that out now. And unpinning the sleeves. Now, normally you would make what's called a gather stitch to gather ruffles like this, but they're so small in a 3T, and frankly, I've never had good luck with doing the gather stitch method and pulling the bobbin thread to make the gathers. So I'm just sort of loosely finger ruffling all the ruffles on this dress. I'll do it with the skirt too. I tried to do it properly on the skirt. I'll explain that when I get there. But basically, I'm just sort of gathering it in a way that I think will be pretty visually appealing and loosely pinning those gathers down. Then I am going to stitch the ruffles to the sleeves after. I think right around here, yes, the thread had fallen and gotten lost. You see a little bit of Maggie in the background there helping me look for it. Can't remember where the switch for the light is on this machine, because the last few times I sewed, I actually used my 1927 Princeton machine. I'm a little bit of a vintage sewing machine nerd. I do not like modern sewing machines. I have this late 1950s, maybe early 1960s Baycrest, which I'm using in this video, and it is a lovely avocado green. And then I also have a brown and cream, somewhere between 1924 and 1927 Princeton. It is one of the earliest electric sewing machines to exist. All it does is a straight stitch, but it's great for quick jobs. You will see me struggle a little bit with the Baycrest. It tends to eat thread a little bit. I'm not quite sure what's wrong with it. There is a vintage sewing machine specialist where the space station is docked right now. It's a little costly to actually go and see him. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I am finger pressing the hem for the sleeves as I sew it. I do this a lot with toddler clothes, especially when I'm working with knits. With wovens like cottons and cotton blends, I will usually actually iron. Now I'm top stitching that ruffle, which will help it to lay flat and make it look a little bit nicer, more polished, more professional. And then repeat the hemming and top stitching on that first sleeve. And zip, zip, zip. Top stitch down the wrist. Now I'm doing one shoulder and one shoulder only of the bodice, and there's a reason for that, and that has to do with the method that I'm going to use to attach the binding after I have the first sleeve and side sewn in. So you see that I am pinning the sleeve down. That's just to help me with it so that I am familiar with how the curves fit together in this pattern. I don't think I bothered with pinning on the second sleeve, or I used a lot fewer pins on the second sleeve, but I never made this pattern before. I do like this pattern though. It is a quick, easy pattern, and I will leave a link in the description below to where I got it from. Like I said, it is totally free. Right. Let's see, what am I doing here? Ah yes, this is the side seam. I got distracted and lost my place in the video. Yay! Oh wait, now I'm doing the side seam. So I started at the waist here, made sure everything was lined up, and made sure that all of my seams were laying in the correct direction as I sewed. And yeah, as you can tell, my sewing machine decided to eat the thread. Apologies for the light there. It was actually jammed up inside and I had to get in there and untangle it from the sewing arm. She needs a good cleaning and oiling at the very least, this machine does. And then finishing up that side seam properly this time. Easing over the bulky seams. And right about here, I had dropped the neck binding, or BabyCat had gotten over here and messed with the pattern pieces or something. Either way, had to get Manchi's help to find the neck binding piece. They found it for me, eventually. There it is. Took me a minute to decide exactly how I was going to do the neck binding. But once I decided what I was going to do and which direction I was going to sew in, it came together pretty quick. The neck binding piece is meant to be a little shorter than your actual neckline. And I am slightly stretching that binding piece as I'm sewing it in. I have folded it in half and then put it together facing the correct side of the bodice. That way, when I flip it right side out, the seam will be on the inside of the neckline. As you'll be able to see a little bit better here in a minute when I top stitch it. Again, top stitching just helps everything lay nice and flat, makes everything look finished and professional. You'll notice I am not zigzag stitching my seams and hems. And part of that is because I am top stitching, and part of that is because I'm using stretch velvet, which as a true knit does not fray. And actually I find that letting the velvet roll naturally rather than trying to finish the seams leads to a softer seam, which is really important in baby and toddler clothes because their skin is so delicate. Even adults with sensitive skin, you do not know delicate skin until you've seen baby skin. All right. Now, that binding has been sewn in and top stitched, and I've closed up that shoulder, and now I'm putting the second sleeve in. And yes, as you can see, I have not pinned it. I'm just being very careful. Why do I not pin things when I'm sewing it just for myself or my own family? Because I'm a lazy bitch. It's as simple as that. Anyway. Now I am doing the hem of the skirt piece. Again, just finger pressing and keeping it as even as possible as I stitch. I've had a thread jam here, just fixing that and getting back to it. And there we are at the end of the hem. And here's where I try and fail to do a gather stitch. My machine got very angry and I got very frustrated very quickly. Still struggling. All jammed up. Trying to figure out the settings on the machine to make this work. Spoiler alert, it's not going to work. Now I am unpicking all of my mess. And giving up on the gather stitch. So now what I'm doing is I am pinning the open sides of the skirt to the open side of the bodice. And then I'm going to find all the centers. I'm going to find the center of the skirt to pin to the side seam on the other side, then the center fronts and center backs of the bodice and the skirt, and pin those together so that it's basically pinned into 4 sections. And then I'm going to work within those 4 sections to make the gathers. It's not perfectly even, but honestly, being a little bit imperfect actually makes the dress twirl better in the end, in my opinion. This part does take a while, and I apologize for that. Lots of pinning to be done. Lots of gathering adjustments and making sure that sleeves aren't in the way. Looks like I'm pretty close to the end now, I think. Just adjusting some of the gathers to make them a little bit more even and nice. Adding a few in that last section. And now I'm going to sew that down. Now, the eagle-eyed among you will notice that I did make a mistake. I forgot to set my thread tension and stitch length back. Not a big deal. I will notice and fix it here in a little bit. And once it's top stitched down, it'll be plenty secure. I had a pin get stuck there that was hidden in a fold. And that's where my machine started to jam up. And I realized that I had messed up my settings. All right, machine is reset and I'm finishing that up, and then moving my magnet full of pins out of the way so that I have the whole surface of my machine, and securely top stitching the waist of this dress. I am spreading the seam a little bit to help the top stitching look nicer and more even, and to make sure that I don't get any weird folds or gathers, especially in the skirt. That can happen. And I just bent the hell out of a sewing needle. Watch me replace that in quick time. And rethread. Now we're almost done. I'm starting from the edge of the sleeve this time to make sure that the edge of the sleeve is even, because that is more important than the hem being even. There are tricks if your hem is uneven at this point. I did not end up needing to use them. This came together perfectly, and I am really impressed with this pattern. Because even with my lazy frazzled mom sewing style, the pieces just fit together so perfectly. This is absolutely a beginner-friendly toddler dress, and it's available in sizes 3 to 12 on the website, which, as I said, will be linked below. And that's that. That was the dress. It came out really nicely, and I will throw some pictures up here in post of what it looks like. No pictures of BabyCat, but I will post pictures of the dress. Alrighty. Happy holidays, everybody. Thanks to scatteredthoughtsofacraftymom.com for the pattern, and I'll see you next time. Happy holidays. Hydrate before you dihydrate. Bye-bye.